Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to the latest in our series of innovation webinars. Today's topic is all about drones, titled Drones, the Future of Mobility and Delivery. My name is Steve Hargreaves. I'll be your host today. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by two expert speakers who I'll introduce shortly. And I am the Employer Partnership Development Manager here at Staffordshire University. I want to invite you to input your questions into the chat box as you go along today. We'll get to your questions right at the end, and we're going to have a Q&A panel with our expert speakers. At the end, I'll also run through some support from Staffordshire University to let you know how we can support your business. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first guest speaker. First guest speaker is Kevin Duckers, co-founder and CEO of the IDU Group. And Kevin will be talking about his company and sharing his insights into drone delivery. So over to you, Kevin.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. As Stephen Wright said, Kevin Duckers, co-founder, CEO of IDU Group. Just a quick introduction in what is IDU Group, and what does the company do and where is our focus. We're currently looking at creating or innovating and designing the last mile infrastructure that would support the last inch of autonomous drone deliveries. We're looking at the moment of residential properties, which you can see a picture of on the screen right now, but also moving on into medical institutes like clinics, hospitals, and then moving on into commercial units, etc. So what we're trying to do is connect the unconnected, and the whole emphasis is to try and get the package inside the building with minimal amounts of fuss, and creating that bridging mechanism between autonomy and human interaction. So that's where we stand at the moment. We're collaborating with several international universities, one of them now being Staffordshire University. We've also got several projects planned later this year in Canada, the US, and also UK and Europe. So fantastic things coming, hopefully, from IDU Group in the next few months. I'm going to push on. Steve, if we could have the next slide, please. Okay, so some of the topics we're going to touch on today, where drones are concerned. We'll take a look into industries which are currently using drones in their business models for efficiency, etc. And we'll go into a bit of detail with some of the areas. We'll then focus, we'll look how that technology is starting to mature and then moving into drone delivery in the future, or the possible future of drone delivery. We'll then look at urban air mobility and how that will have an impact on today's society. And then we'll focus on the barriers. So what's happening, we're probably looking at regulatory and policymakers and what they're doing, as well as some of the technology barriers, etc. Okay, Steve, can we move to the next slide? Okay, so while drones have been used in private industries for some decades now, the commercial applications continue to expand as quickly as innovators can come up with new ideas, really. As drones become more prevalent in society, much of this growth is attributed not only to declining costs of the technology, but also the adjustments of governmental restrictions, which we've kind of just briefly spoke about. So as you can see, that some of the points, and I'll dive into agriculture first. So obviously, as we're fully aware, as climate change continues to create new layers of complexity, within the agriculture supply chain, rapidly evolving conditions further exacerbate these challenges. And some of the latest figures, which we're now seeing across Europe for agriculture, tied into climate change, it can impact agriculture up to 16% by 2050, which is quite a huge amount. So what's the benefits of using drones in agriculture exactly? Okay, so farmers can optimize the spraying of pesticides in areas that need treatment and significantly reduce the amount used. And also, as you're probably aware, industrial fertilizer pesticides has now become a major health concern. So the more that we can reduce these, obviously the better. Farmers can control crop quality and also access difficult areas to reach that normal traditional farming tools can't get access to. And then if we look at some of the data aggregation of the drones and how they're utilised in agriculture, photos can be taken from mapping systems, which can inform farmers about irrigation or soil infestation problems. So again, it allows the farmer to be more informed when dealing with a cycle crop or yearly crop. We're also seeing drones being utilised in utilities for airborne inspections and remote assets such as pipelines and power lines. So again, a big infrastructure piece and focusing on data aggregation or data collection. Roads, rail and buildings. And then if we kind of just focus briefly on oil and gas, I mean, oil and gas is again a real cost benefit. The oil and gas industry is increasingly utilising drones, particularly for remote monitoring, inspection and predictive maintenance of critical infrastructure. But more recently, there's been a rise in using drones. So a real good use case for drones has been in oil spill incident response. Drones can provide a 360-degree to view the monitoring the actual incidents and also monitoring field of operations. So again, it allows personalities or companies to be better well informed of the incident itself. As we move to looking at survey solar power generation plants and mining oil explorations, public safety and disaster response. Another great use case for drone technology. While disasters are ongoing, drones can be extremely useful in aiding emergency services to figure out. So you've got that halo effect of looking down at the situation, and then they can best plan their rescue efforts to be able to support. Increasingly, drones are being used to assist these services in various stages of the emergency management. In fact, UAVs can assist with, not just during, but after the actual incident itself to be able to see the before and after action review. I mean, to see the seriousness of this, the UK government last year announced an £8 million agreement for companies with the latest drone technologies to provide its products to the emergency services. Now, and then also, onboard data processing, maximise comms efficiency. Now, most of these industries which are utilising drones at the moment is obviously, it's kind of driven by data aggregation and understanding the bigger picture. But a lot of it is for cost reduction, safety improvements, and also environmental benefits. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we see the maturity of the technology already being utilised inside some of the business cases we've just gone through, if you take that layered effect and then move it across to now what we're advancing into, which is drone delivery and urban air mobility. So far, we've seen some fantastic achievements from around the world. At the moment, there's over 27 countries which are testing the application of drone delivery. Some of the companies are doing fantastic things in countries like Australia, Switzerland, Germany, Singapore, the United Kingdom, Canada, and also the US. And realistically, what they're trying to do is just understand the feasibility and the profitability of unmanned delivery services. But why are they focusing on last mile delivery? Okay, so last mile delivery is probably the most expensive part of the package journey. It approximates to 55% of the actual cost of any package which is delivered. There's a lot of other inefficiencies which are tied to that. So there's a phrase which is used in last mile delivery called no one home syndrome, or no one at home, which represents at least 20% of parcels which have been delivered. They get sent back to the depot. And this has got an actual annual cost of $20 billion per year. So by not being home, that's actually created a massive inefficiency in the last mile logistics. But also, when you look at this on a environmental impact, it's creating an extra 3,742 metric tons of carbon emissions into the atmosphere. So if you take that as the 20% and obviously look at the parcels which are really successfully delivered, you'll start to understand the impact of the environment in last mile delivery. We've also started to see something more in the States than in the UK at the moment, but parcel theft is on the rise. Up to 1.7 million parcels go missing every single day in the US, which is having a cost on the last mile delivery logistics companies of 6 billion per annum. So are drones environmentally friendly last milers? As we start to see the applications of drones moving products back and forward, you start to think of the congestion on the road. And there's one thing I always look at is when you're sat in a traffic jam, whether it's the A500 or the M6, and look around and see one person in each car. Just imagine what they're actually out collecting, or what are they actually doing? What's their movement? What's their plan? And if you think about it, it's just to go and pick up a parcel, or it's to pick up an item that they forgot from the shop, then realistically there's more efficient ways of doing this, and obviously drone technology could be one of them. But in addition to the cost and the operational performance, there is a significant environmental benefit to revolutionising the last mile model to this model itself, as we've just said. We're starting to see increasing opportunities in the mid-mile as we see maturity in the technology, so better battery life, better motor or rotor engines themselves, the capability to lift more payload for a further distance is now starting to approach. I think at the moment 100 kilograms over the distance of 4 hours flight is probably the norm. Whereas 5 years ago, you'd be lucky to lift a 5 kg parcel for more than 18 minutes. So we're starting to see the technology mature and really impact, and people focusing on the middle mile and where that can be used as a case. Okay, the remote and hard to reach locations is a fantastic case study. When we look at this, I would focus on the emerging or the developing world. The lack of access to all weather roads is one of the biggest challenges facing affordable healthcare provision in rural areas, since many roads in these rural areas are inaccessible during rainy seasons. Their population are hindered from life-saving and critical health products. This challenging terrain and gaps in infrastructure contributes to why at least half the world's population lacks access to essential health products and services. And again, I think at the moment we're saying 2/3 of the world don't have access to functioning or infrastructure for road networks. So drone technology really bridges this gap, and it's capable of getting the products or products of need where it needs to be at any one time. When we look at the emergency response and obviously tie the same thing in, you're looking at being able to deliver products like blood, vaccines, even snakebite serum, let's say, and other medical supplies to rural areas, and it can reach the victims who require immediate medical attention within minutes. So obviously taking away the road congestion, the time, and everything else, the time to travel, which in some cases could mean the difference between life and death. So again, a real great case use there for drone technologies in delivery. And then the last point is obviously communication provision. It's either ad hoc in response to events or strategic. For example, providing 5G coverage to rural areas where personnel don't have access to communications. By having a drone on a powered tether, you can put it up in the sky and you can actually start beaming down 5G technology or 4G communication technology to allow people to communicate. So a real great case study there. Next slide. Okay, so as we take that and we move now into urban air mobility, which is a fantastic concept, and in the next, between the next 5 to 10 years, you could be jumping in an Uber taxi, which would take you from Stafford to Birmingham in less than 10 minutes, cutting out all of the M6 traffic, which is fantastic. But by 2030, it's estimated that 60% of the world's population will be urbanized or living in urban environments. This significant population growth is expected to create a real need for innovative mobility options. As ground infrastructure becomes increasingly congested, as we see motorways continually being rebuilt and rebuilt to put up with the pressures. And it'll be able to provide people with a safe, sustainable, convenient solution that leverages the airspace above the cities and be able to move freely. Now, urban air mobility has become a new frontier in aviation by the desire of small, quiet, sustainable aircraft to provide mass transportation for intra-city and short-haul regional travel. So again, it's not going to take over or dominate the space of general aviation, but it's going to create this new network and this new way of travel. And like I say, what seemed like a pipe dream less than a decade ago looks set to become a reality as the sector's early movers prepare their innovative electric vertical takeoff and landing, or eVTOL aircraft programs for commercial service. And we'll probably see this in the next 3 years. If we look at what's happening around the West Midlands, which seems to be leading the future mobility race, we've got in November, you've got Hyundai Motor Group in collaboration with Coventry City Council and the UK government, who have partnered with Urban Airport, who are launching what's described as the world's first air mobility site, which they've called Air One. And they want to demonstrate the potential of urban air mobility for the UK and also the worldwide. So we want to be seen as world leaders in this. But as we move forward on air mobility, the only way that this would be viable is with a holistic view of the unmanned traffic management systems, being able to collaborate and fit within. Okay, next slide. Okay, but sadly there are quite a few barriers, and I'll touch on a few of the barriers going through, talking about the system-wide approach to UAV and UTM, so the drones itself and the traffic management systems which are there to support. We'll look at physical, non-physical assets supporting technologies for air mobility and also the infrastructure. So the infrastructure itself, mission-critical communications, sensor systems, focusing on detect and avoid. One of the key things that's going to be required for beyond visual line of sight. And then we'll look beyond the traffic management system. This is one of my favourite parts. We'll look beyond the traffic management system and look at the actual infrastructure requirements which are going to be required to be able to support and also enable the future rollout of drone technology. And then after that, I'll pass on to Philip to talk about public perception, social acceptance, and also the regulations as the actual boundaries. Next slide. Okay, so mission critical communications. All type, or should I say, type communications with drones are always required. To be clear, I think to understand, drones already enjoy a degree of autonomy. For example, many are already automated, following by pre-programmed flights or flight paths. However, there's a real huge difference between automated and autonomous. It's projected that manned aircraft with onboard pilots will be required till probably between 25 and 27. And as we see technology maturity move forward, I really do see a shift to full autonomous systems between 27 and 2030. Looking at beyond visual line of sight, or BVLOS, will require a higher efficiency of communications with lower latency speeds to support operations. So when we look at communication, we talk about communications, I think for this type of technology, or not just this type of technology, but also ground-based vehicles, we're looking at communications will be the new air of the future for autonomy. So moving from a more two or three-dimensional space to a fourth-dimensional space, and again, we'll look at the infrastructure requirements for that shortly. But we've seen some fantastic things. I mean, the opportunity for communications or a standardization of communication platforms for drones, and how does that weave into the current framework of systems that we've got today? What infrastructure would be required and how much more? Well, there's multiple telecommunication companies within the UK and also, well, globally, exploring and innovating within this space. So UK is Telefonica, O2, Vodafone and Three Mobile These are just a few of the companies which are really pushing the envelope on solving the problems within this innovative space. But again, it's down to reliability. Obviously, the UAV technology or the drone technology will need constant communications to be able to support full autonomous operations. Okay, next slide. Okay, so system sensors, or focusing on beyond visual line of sight and that full autonomy. There's many sensors in a drone which is necessary for it to fly autonomously. Internal sensors such as accelerometer help the drone remain in flight, providing data to allow the autopilot to adjust motor speeds, and that's on a multi-rotor configuration. And then again, control surface deflections for fixed wing configuration to steer the drone itself. Navigation sensors such as GPS or magnetic sensors aid the drone to fly along a specific path or specific waypoint by measuring the drone's location and orientation with respect to the Earth itself. Airflow sensors allow the drone to measure the airspeed, temperature, and density, and then information maintain safe control of the aircraft at all times. The drone may also use the sensors and estimate wind speed, direction, assist with landing maneuvers, and obviously how that's integrated into a social acceptance where it's going. But as we focus on the actual detecting the void technologies itself, is going to be a real key function when it comes down to beyond visual line of sight. So that would enable a drone to understand its environment, so situationally aware. Now, most of these technologies are still let's say technically they're coming up, so there's still a lot of work to be done. We've had some great advancements in the technology, but there's still more to come, and we really need to work hard on this. Okay, next slide. Okay, so my favourite piece with regard to all of this, when we look at air mobility or drone delivery, there's going to be a requirement for an infrastructure update, and it's one of the things that UK government's focusing on, and not just the UK government, but the world itself. It's estimated we'll spend an extra 24 trillion on infrastructure in the next 2 decades. And I think when we look at focusing on infrastructure itself for the next 2 decades, we need to factor in what is the future, because if the future isn't analog cars and it's more digital autonomous vehicles, or it's last mile logistics by drone, we need to really focus on the infrastructure that's required to support and enable all of those operations. So when we look at, there's a fantastic picture at the bottom right hand side as I'm looking, and that's the actual urban airport, which is planned to be set up in Coventry later this year in November. So again, a vertiport, multiple takeoff landing pads for drones, so almost like a train station for drone operations. We'll be looking at service centres, taxis, transport. The transport vehicles can be stored, inspected, and repaired. Also, charging stations for UAS batteries or drone batteries. But then again, looking at the actual key piece for the drone delivery, which is the receiving stations, such as lockers. What we see today, you see the Amazon lockers on some of the trips you might see at petrol stations or at shopping centres. Again, we're going to need this type of infrastructure to be able to support the first and the last inch of the drone delivery model, fully automating the process. So moving forward on that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I think just briefly to sum it up, I think the two key messages or two key takeaways today is just looking at the commercial usage of drones and how it's gained steady momentum inside everyday tasks, whether it's agriculture, whether it's oil and gas. And we see the technology maturing whilst these operations are being conducted. And these have been real big learning curves to be able to now start to implement this technology in future air mobility and also drone delivery. So I don't think it's a case of if, I think it's a case of when will this be implemented. And then the second point is, we really need to start to focus on the infrastructure piece, because if the infrastructure isn't there and ready when all of this is, no pun intended, take off, there's going to be a real backlog of our capabilities and how we can move forward with this. Okay, Luke, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'll pass the baton now to Philip Butterworth-Hayes of CIVATAGlobal, who will go through the policies, etc.
Kevin, thank you very much indeed. That's a really comprehensive roundup of a very, very complex and difficult. And on the face of it, the things I'm going to be talking about, policies, rules, and public perception, is quite dry compared to what Kevin's just mentioned. But actually, as soon as you start looking at it, it's actually a lot more interesting and mind-blowing than the technology we've just seen. Because this will change our lives entirely in ways that we don't yet realize. We're at the start of the kind of revolution that the mobile phone industry dumped on us, and it's going to change quite a lot of things in all sorts of ways. And this is what I'm going to be talking about, really, is what are the unintentional and the intentional consequences of embracing these technologies? Because embracing them, we're going to have to. They are being pushed at the moment by the three most powerful forces on Earth, which is the US Department of Defense, the Chinese government, and Silicon Valley. And between them, they are funding this revolution. And they're funding a technology revolution to which there is yet no market. So it doesn't exist. I have never seen a drone flying commercially, operationally in my life. And I've traveled far and wide, and I've never seen one. Well, if all this technology is being developed and all these billions of dollars are being invested in this is a kind of question mark. Why not? Why aren't they there? Why aren't we seeing them every day in our lives? And the answer to that, I think, is threefold. There are three things we need to do to get this across the line, to get the skies full of drones. The first one is that we've got to get the regulations in place. The second thing is that we have to get the standards in place. And then we also have to get the public perception in place. And we can do some of that quite easily. We can throw time and money at this, and we can cure all the engineering problems that there are. The one thing we can't yet do is to be clear about whether the public want this and will accept it. And it's not just a question of acceptance for this industry. They have to embrace it. People actually have to look at this and say, I want this, and I want it bigger and better and faster and quieter. And that is what's going to lead the revolution. Can we have the next slide? And that's why CIVATAGlobal was born. CIVATAGlobal is a trade association made up half of local authorities and cities and the other half of the industry. And what we want to do is create this bridge between the technology push guys, the industry who have developed this fantastic technology and are now looking for the market, and the local authorities, the communities, who at the moment have absolutely no idea what's around the corner. And if you ask most local authorities in the UK what your drone policy is, first of all, they'll say we haven't got time to talk to you because we're in a COVID crisis. And then secondly, drones, that's not for us, and we can't, it's not something that we're going to be concerned with. And quite rightly too, they have a lot of other priorities. And yet they are going to be the ones who are going to develop the ecosystems to make everything that Kevin has just said work properly. And this is a huge task, because the people who are responsible for developing ground transport systems in the town halls, integrating the road networks with the rail networks and all of that, they are going to be tasked with now introducing this third dimension of the of developing a policy in the air. And that is that from a standing start, without knowing anything at all about it. And if you look at it, that is a hugely difficult task for them. They won't be alone, of course, because some of the responsibilities will devolve from the local authorities, to the National Civil Aviation Regulator, and it'll be the drone operators themselves. But if you ask some basic fundamental questions like, who owns the airspace above you? Who owns the airspace up to 400 feet in a city? you're going to get an awful lot of different answers. So we haven't even started the starting point yet. We haven't even cracked some of the very, very simple things. And that's why we developed CIVATAGlobal as an international association to start answering some of those very, very basic questions. Who owns the airspace? Who's going to be managing it? Who's going to be responsible for ensuring that all people's interests are safe? We don't know the answer. We have no idea, but we want to start that dialogue happening. Great. Can we have the next slide, please? So there are four major concerns that regulators, policymakers, and the public have with drones. Are they safe? Are they secure? Will my privacy be protected? And are they environmentally sustainable? So this is looking at it from a regulatory side. So is it safe? So let's just look at that for 1 second. What does it mean? Is it safe? What is an acceptable level of safety? What will the regulators accept and what will the public accept? And it's a kind of weird gap that the public accept for aviation safety and for road safety. So you can kill 70,000 people on the roads a year, and nobody thinks that's extraordinary or unusual. If you kill 2,000 people in an aeroplane crash, or 3,000 people in several aeroplane crashes, then that's a major catastrophe. That's a huge catastrophe. So what is a safe level? What is a safe level of reasonable operational procedures for urban air mobility? Nobody knows. The way the regulations are written at the moment, it has to be the same degrees of safety that civil aviation applies. So in other words, it's off the top of my head, it's something like that. It's one serious incident for every 1 million flights, if you're looking at the safety of the vehicle, and one serious incident for every 10 million operational cycles if you're looking at the infrastructure. Great. I mean, that's a fantastic target. What does it actually mean when you come to designing something? You're designing a passenger vehicle. How can you actually apply those sort of algorithms to what you're designing? We can do that with aviation because we've got 50, 60, 70 years of flying jets, and we have this enormous amount of data. How can you be sure that your passenger carrying vehicle, your electrical passenger carrying vehicle, and I'm much more ambitious than Kevin. I think that we're going to see these flying in 2024. That's when the European Aviation Safety Agency says it's going to certify it, and that's when Paris will have its first line of vertiports all the way along the sign saying taking people from Paris out to the Olympics. So how do you do that? So and if you're looking at those sort of levels of safety, how can you be sure that the regulator, the people who are responsible for saying this is the right level of safety, are properly equipped to do that? So, I mean, civil aviation regulators know a lot about big aeroplanes. They know nothing at all about small aeroplanes, electrically driven aeroplanes, because they don't exist yet. They're only in the design phase. So that's one interesting question. Is it secure? Again, secure from whom? There's the clueless, there's the criminal, and there's the terrorist. So we have to create this ecosystem to be safe and secure from all those different actors. And again, this is a huge undertaking. Will my privacy be protected? So if I'm flying a drone with a camera and I'm taking a picture of somebody putting washing on the line, in theory, as it flies over, and that is stored somewhere, that image is stored somewhere, in theory, that has to meet the Data Protection Act that we have. And you have to ask permission from that person that you're overflying, whether you can take and store that image. Well, we have a long way to go to actually understanding the implications of this. And is it environmentally sustainable? There are a lot of environmental issues here, which we don't yet know anything about. We don't know the impact of drones flying in mass on wildlife, whether the vibration issues are large. I mean, there are huge issues which we need to discover. the thing is, what is remarkable about this industry is that all these highly complex and very difficult questions will be answered. And they'll be answered at a speed which the aviation industry has never seen before. Right, can we have a next slide, please? So is it safe? So we've talked a little bit about what does safety mean? What is the target level of safety? And what is quite extraordinary about this is that the European Union Aviation Safety Agency did a survey of 6 cities where they had about 60,000 residents, and they asked them various questions about what they think about urban air mobility. They showed them the video first of all and said, do you want it? What are your major concerns? Major concerns, obviously. And what surprised me is that for a lot of people, safety wasn't an issue, because they thought that if it's flying, if it's in the air, then it must be regulated and it must be safe, which is kind of both really interesting, but also extremely worrying, because the issue of what is safe has to be properly addressed in a way that everybody understands what is a reasonable target, as we've said. But that is a very, very complex debate. So at the moment, what we're going to do is we're going to build and fly these vehicles using the current civil aviation regulations and standards of safety as laid down by international and national regulators. And that's fine. It's going to slow things down quite a lot. And I think eventually, as the public becomes used to these, used to drones, used to passenger vehicles, then that might shift a bit. I think what we will regard as safety, because if there's an accident tomorrow, if there's a drone accident tomorrow and somebody's being killed, and I mean, thank heavens there hasn't been in this country, then you can put all these plans that we've laid out back 2 or 3 years at least, because that is the nature of the industry. So we have to be safe, and we have to be seen to be safe, but we also have to work very hard, as I said, on understanding what that means, what actually safety means. Right, let's have another one. If we could, another slide. Is it secure? And this is something which I think personally is the most interesting one, because it's a pretty obvious question. Is the airspace in above my town, my village, my city secure? Secure from what? So the Gatwick drone incident in 2018 was kind of propelled a lot of regulators thinking about what security is. So you have a drone popping up and down above a terminal, or we think it could have been a drone popping up and down above a terminal in Gatwick, and the whole place shut down. And hundreds of flights were diverted, thousands of pounds was lost because of a simple drone going up and down. So a lot of people are now developing security systems, anti-drone systems based on a drone flying into their airspace area. That's not what the threat is going to be. So the threat could come from all sorts of things. It could come from a drone flying into a restricted area. It could come from a drone hovering 5,000 feet above that restricted area and dropping something unpleasant on it. It could come from a swarm of drones. It could come from a load of drones which are autonomous, home built, and you can't, very difficult to detect. So we have to be clear, first of all, about what it is the threat, what the threat really is. And we don't know that because we haven't really thought about it properly. And then once you've detected a drone, then what do you do? Because the people who detect the drones won't be the same people who'll mitigate them. So you pass that on to the police and the security service to deal with a rogue drone. And they will have various capabilities of dealing with that drone depending on the environment. The most common and most obvious one is to identify the drone using artificial intelligence, realize what kind of drone it is, and then zap it in some way by spoofing the signal or cutting the signal off from its navigational system and bringing it down. Works very well in a field, doesn't work quite so well when you've got a lot of other radio systems and radars and other communications, because you can jam those as well. So we have to be very careful about how we look at that. And the cost of this is going to be enormous. These systems for detecting and bringing down drones will get cheaper, and they will get smaller. But you know, if you look at what Germany is defending its 16 largest airports with anti-drone detection systems, I don't know what they're spending, 20 million in airports, something like that. So it's not cheap, but we have to think about how we do this properly. Yeah, I'm just raising a lot of questions here without coming with answers, but we will find answers, and I'll come to some of those in a minute. Right, that's the security count. What's the next slide we have? How will my privacy be protected? As we've mentioned, it's absolutely key that drones carrying cameras either turn them off when they fly, or if they're using them, that they get permission from people whose pictures they are taking. And there are lots of ways we can do that, as long as the drones are properly registered and properly flying by certified operators. We can create no-go zones. We can create all sorts of corridors where they can fly. But once you start looking at this in a bit of detail, and you say, okay, well, what we'll do is we will design in our city these air corridors where drones can fly to make sure that no one's privacy is being compromised in any way. And you look at the multi-occupancy building, a skyscraper with say 20 floors. Floors 3 and 4 are leased to a government agency. Everybody else in that building will be very happy to have drones flying past. Like the look of them, they're interesting, except for floors 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 where the government agency is there, and they don't want that. They don't want that drone corridor anywhere near. So we're going to have to design those routes based on the preferences and priorities of the people, the communities of the people who will be flying it over. So that's another interesting issue. Privacy. Okay, what's the next slide? Is it environmentally sustainable? So we have noise, we have visual pollution, and one of the things about aircraft noise is to a lot of people, aircraft noise is extremely unpleasant. The vibration is unpleasant. To other people, it's part of their daily life. Noise is a very personal thing, and it's very difficult to measure its nuisance value. But we're going to have to do that. All we've known so far is that the sound of an electrically powered vertical takeoff and landing aircraft is both a lot less than, well, obviously a lot less than a helicopter, but it's surprisingly quiet. Surprisingly quiet. However, it is also there. It's a nuisance, and the one thing we can't have is drones and passenger aircraft in holding positions around the vertiports and the landing areas, because there's no room down there and they've got to wait to come in, because that's just not going to work. So we have to, from day one, make sure that everything flies in and out very, very easily. There are no holding patterns, that the ground infrastructure is integrated with the air infrastructure, so we get the fastest, the best routes possible. Wildlife protection, huge issue, big issue, and it's a safety issue as well, because we don't know yet what's going to happen if a flock of seagulls flies into some of these passenger carrying drones. We'll find out. There's a lot of contrary evidence about the impact of that. 5G is going to be used, or communication system is going to be an issue. We know that mobile network operators are going to be responsible for various things like command and control. We're going to rely on mobile networks for video downlinking, and also for the UTM system, the urban traffic management system, where we can have a lot of digital messages flying around, but essentially track the drones and identify them. So this has to be very carefully thought out of in terms of this vast amount of data that's going to be flying through the air. Is it environmentally sound? Does it meet all all the safety requirements and security requirements? And does it fit into existing infrastructure? We can't have, we can't just put landing sites where we want to. Another European Union study has shown that by the time we get to technical maturity, we will need a landing site for every 3,000 residents in a city. That's a landing site for a passenger vehicle or a drone. So that's a lot of landing sites. And we have to make sure that they are where they should be. And of course, there is the possibility that drones, certainly in last mile cargo delivery, will take a lot of vans and cars off the roads. I'm not quite so convinced it's going to happen with passengers, but certainly it should be part of a city's decarbonisation strategy. That's going to be terribly important. Okay, one more slide, I think. One more slide. So I've got two messages too. My message is that having looked at this just in a little bit of detail, it's going to have to come from the community. The communities are going to have to want this. And if the communities don't want it, they're going to have a forum that says, I'm sorry, it's not for us. So it has to be inclusive, it has to be affordable, and it has to be diverse. So we have to show the benefits to everybody on the ground, and everybody has to have a stake in this, whether they're a traveller, or whether they're part of the community, which is going to be overflown, or whether they can take part in the services. They really have to have a stake in this. And the other part is the technical challenge can be solved with time and money. The most complex challenge is public acceptance. And that sounds a bit trite. And public acceptance is more than just getting, as I said, their tacit approval. People are going to have to want this. And the way you do that is that you trial, you demonstrate, you show, and the first iterations of urban air mobility have got to be overwhelmingly positive. They've got to be shown to deliver benefits, healthcare benefits, medical benefits, just improving people's lives in some way, shape, and form. If you do that, then we're halfway there to cracking the issue of community acceptance. Right, that's me finished. I shall pass it over now to a discussion.
Thanks, Philip. That was really interesting, and thanks for Kevin as well for his presentation. So I'd like to encourage you now to enter your questions in the chat box. Just while you're thinking of your questions for the panel, I'm just going to run through some support that Staffordshire University can offer your business. So as you heard all about drones today, we do support companies who are developing drone technology, but we can also support companies who are developing innovations in transport, logistics and mobility. So we have funding for 45 Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire companies in the area. We can help them with innovative products and services, not just new to the market, but new to their company as well. So what we offer is 12 months of fully funded support. We can offer an innovation consultant, which is a graduate, and also an academic supervisor for that graduate to work with you on your innovation. We're more than happy to give you access to equipment, labs and facilities. Obviously, this is subject to eligibility and application, but more than happy to speak to any businesses about their ideas about mobility and see how we can help you to develop new things. Another subject, not just about mobility, we have lots of other support to local businesses. So we fund prototypes for local businesses who want to develop a new product. We have lots of machinery at Staffordshire University that you will have access to. We also have a incubation and startup hatchery, and I'm actually here today in our hatchery doing tours to businesses that are interested into moving into the hatchery. So the hatchery is just £65 a month, and that gives you access to a shared area which you can use as your office. Also, we have private offices ranging in size from 3 to 6 people. If you are interested in an office space in a brand new facility in the heart of Stoke-on-Trent, then certainly it's a good option, and please contact us for more information. We've got access to specialist equipment on site as well that you will have access to as part of that. And as part of the university ecosystem, we will help you to support your skills development as a company. So for any companies, we do have access to apprenticeships funding and also CPD funding, where we can give you access to free training, essentially. So please contact us about your training needs. We do have funding at the moment for Staffordshire-based companies. Finally, we do have a Unitemps agency which can give you support to hire talent, student and graduate talent, and that's for any part-time, full-time, or gap year placements that you might have in your company. So again, please feel free to get in touch with us after the presentations today of any questions about this support. We also support large employers, not just SMEs, so we have got access to government funding such as KTPs, which is a knowledge transfer partnership, and that's a 1 or 2 year partnership with a large employer to talk about innovation and to introduce new products to their market. So to find out more about our innovation ecosystem, you can contact us at employers@staffs.ac.uk, and we'll arrange a one-to-one chat with you at your convenience. Also visit our website, staffs.ac.uk/business services for a list of what we do. We also have an innovation zone brochure which outlines all of our machinery, such as our robotic arms, etc., and you can have access to that. Just a plug for our future webinars. We have a number of webinars in the future, and they are listed on our website, and we have one next week all about R&D tax credits. So if you're interested in that one, please feel free to book online. So I'd like to invite the panel members back on camera, and we'll look at the questions now. So give us 2 seconds. So we've got a question here from Tony. It's an observation. He says, I think education and understanding of organisations, public, city councils and local authorities are at the forefront of drone technology. Companies such as water, nuclear, ports, enforcements are really encouraging great benefits. So it's more of a comment really than a question, that one. Thanks for that, Tony. Any of the panel members want to add anything to Tony's comment there about how other agencies are sort of getting involved with this?
No, more of an apology. I probably should have covered some of them, Steve, but obviously there's so many out there at the moment that are really grasping the use cases of drone technology and the efficiency of how to do so. But also, I think it's a great point picked up by Tony, because it's kind of elaborating that, you know, more people need to be be aware of the technology and how it's being utilized. There's so many spaces using it, but it's really not written about yet. If we look at what Philip said about the Gatwick incident, then hundreds of thousands of people will hear about that, but nobody will hear about the great use cases that drone technology is, you know, supported today. So, no, I think that's a great point by Tony.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think the largest drone operator in the world is the Dutch Ministry of Water and Water Management and Transport, which uses drones incredibly efficiently to look at all their canals and their bridges, and saves lives when they're looking at working at high level. Huge improvements to infrastructure costs, which is, you know, a local authority or a national authority which has been able to achieve that. And they have national policies, which, you know, I think it would be really good if we had the same kind of approach in this country as they do in other parts of the world to embrace this technology by councils and regional and, you know, and national authorities.
Definitely. So hopefully that helps, Tony. So we'll go on to the next question now from Olivia. Are you aware of the Biometrics and Surveillance Camera Commissioner's Code of Conduct? What are your views on making this compliance and the CEA drones pilot's license. So have any of the panel members got any views on Olivia's question there?
At the moment, this is covered in the Data Protection Act. So your operation has to meet Data Protection Act requirements in the UK, GDPR, and the rest of the European Union. In terms of actually formalizing that as part of the commercial license, that's a really interesting question. But I think we're not in a position yet where that is a huge issue. At the moment, because of the way that things are organized, you have you don't have autonomous beyond visual line of sight operations at scale. So you don't have one person to flying 100 drones. You have one drone and three people operating it. You know, somebody at the landing site, somebody extended visual line of sight, and the pilot. And until you actually move to that stage where you start to have autonomous operations, when you start to have hundreds of drones flying around there, doing all sorts of different things, I don't think the need is there until that's in place, and that's a few years away. As we move towards that situation, then I think we should certainly start incorporating that, not so much in the pilot, because there won't be any pilots, but in the operator. I think we need to be very clear that the data protection has to be part of the operator's license. I don't know whether Kevin would agree with that.
Yeah, no, I think I shudder when I see these questions. So my past life was as a risk manager, so I have an understanding of surveillance, etc., etc. And if I was to use a comparable, and I think this is where we need to get it right, and go back to what Philip said about public perception, all of that type of stuff. If we compare what we're about to do with drones to social media, and how we got social media wrong, because if we weren't ready for social media, and now we've got to this point where actually, we start to understand that data was being aggregated when it shouldn't have. People's perceptions were being swayed by certain algorithms, machine learning, etc., etc. And I think when we look at this, piece now, I think the key word is transparency. Definitely on drone operations, all drone operations should be transparent, and operators should be transparent about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and also what data are they aggregating. And I think it's going to be a real key piece for the future, because people are starting to become self-aware of their data footprint or their digital footprint. So but to touch on that, I think there's an organisation in Southern Ireland called Sky Tango, which is starting to look at this piece now and really start to bring a framework together of a standardization from start to finish of any drone operations, and pulling some key partners in to really delve into the depths of what does this look like, and surveillance is part of that. Where is the camera operating? Should people be allowed to understand if a drone has flown over their garden? Well, actually, did you aggregate any data from my house, or my own property? We need to know that. So I think transparency is key, but we'll see how the industry leads this way.
Just one final point on that. What we're seeing in the drone space is actually part of a much wider digitization of airspace. So at the moment, it's very clear we just have air traffic control, air traffic management from airports up to about 45,000 feet. In the future, everything's going to be digitized. So we're going to have a single airspace going from 0 feet up to space, where we're going to have all sorts of new vehicles flying, everything from space tourist vehicles. We're going to have personal transport vehicles. We're going to have backpacks flying us all over the place. This is the future. So the airspace is going to be very, very, very different. And somehow we're going to have to manage this as a continuum, as a new type of airspace, where you won't have people controlling it or people managing it. You will have systems managing it, talking to each other in different ways. And the key is to get those systems to talk to each other in a validated, secure way, in a trusted way, so you can't get wrong people into the system. And part of that, along with cybersecurity, is data protection. And so you have to build these systems so they talk to each other with those inbuilt digital trust frameworks, however you want to call it, in place.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Kevin. That's a very comprehensive answer there to the question. Hopefully that helps. Two more questions. One question being, how do people get involved with Savarta-Global? I just wondered, perhaps that's a question for you, Phil. Do you want to give a plug to your services and how people can get involved?
Absolutely. If you're a local authority, it's free. Just come along and go to the website, savartaglobal.org, and just say you want to join. And what we do is we do white papers. So we've just done a white paper on what a local authority needs to do to develop its own drone ecosystem, various stages, the milestones. We look at the responsibilities that they have. Join it. It's a global community. Yeah. Thank you.
Definitely. And Staffordshire University have recently joined, and I'm certainly enjoying the content that you're sending us. So that's an endorsement from us as well.
Thank you.
Next question, I think that's for me. It's what's the mobility program's eligibility criteria? So thanks for that question. The eligibility criteria for our programs is that you must be an SME in the Staffordshire area, including Stoke-on-Trent. So if you're an SME and you want to get involved with the university, then you'd be eligible for our support. So just please get in touch and we'll talk you through the process, the application process. If you're not an SME or you're not in Staffordshire, then please get in touch with us anyway. There are other support that we can offer to you. So hopefully that answers that question as well. That seems to be all the questions now. So I'd like to thank the panelists once again for your time today. Certainly found it really enjoyable and insightful. I'm sure the guests have as well. This webinar is recorded, so available on playback for anyone who's missed it today. And I'm sure we'll get some questions in the future. So if you do have any other questions, please email them in to employers@staffs.ac.uk and we will get back to you. And thanks everybody for joining us today and hope you have an enjoyable evening.